Hello, everybody. You're muted, Jim.
Yep. Hey, Tom.
Hey.
Hey, the plans have changed because of some things, and so we're going to be starting at 7:30. Then we're going to read the rules and then go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I've got to go back out because I'm still collecting questions. Okay.
Get us the hard ones, Jim.
Okay. I sure will.
Bye-bye. Hi, Alicia.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good as well. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, we are live streaming the video on Facebook. So it's a change. Sorry, change to get the link out for technology. So gonna have you guys mute until just before we get started.
Okay, we'll do. Well, we'll see all you all in Virginia here in a couple minutes.
Yep, slight change in technology. Thank you.
That's okay.
Logging in right now, guys. Oh, dude, we got the.
Hey, Daniel, how are you doing? Hey, just so you know, we are Facebook Live and it's already live right now, just so you know.
Cool. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, please. All right, thanks, Alyssa. Hey, Tom. Hey, Alyssa, Elisa, sorry, how far do you live from Petersburg? It's only like an hour, right?
Correct. I'm about an hour south.
Cool. We're having this, the guys from Virginia Rising are having a Great American Tailgate tomorrow, like 5 to 8. And the idea is to patronize some of these small businesses, including the folks in downtown Petersburg. And Brad Slaybaugh, who I think you've been on with, and I and some other folks are going to be in downtown Petersburg. It'd be great to see you if you can make it over.
I will do my best.
Jim, if you're out there, we've got a 1-minute warning if you can start your video. Nelson, if you wanted to start your video.
It says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Let me invite you here.
Oh, thank you. I will accept your invitation. Oh,
We're all on, and we're live on Facebook.
hello, everyone, and welcome to the encore performance of our, well, actually, we don't have a name for this yet. So welcome to our Tea Party Serious Stuff series. Come up with a better one later, where we're focusing on cultural and political issues of our day and bring them to light under a clear and strong constitutional filter, because that's what we do. Our launch served as a very good start, and with these series of forums and events, and we are blessed to be able to have a worthy follow-up with this critical senatorial debate tonight. My name is Nelson Velez, and I have been blessed to serve you as your Tea Party chairman over these last couple of years. This is the Tea Party Coalition of Freedom. Our initials are VATP, and that may have caused confusion, and that may have caused a unusual bump in viewership, because they may have thought that VATP was Virginia toilet paper, but that is not the case. It is Virginia Tea Party. And although we do have similar things where we strive to clean up messes from foul places, but we are not toilet paper. This event is actually the second forum involving our 3 qualified GOP senatorial candidates. Virginia Tea Party has always set an incredible standard for engagement, impact, and influence, and they had the first forum right out of the box. This Virginia shutdown has been an already pivotal, has already made a pivotal election even more dramatic and even more historic. This election has been with the elections over the past decade, is not business as usual. It's not same old, same old. There is a real sense of urgency regarding the state of our republic that has been represented out of a real fear dating back to 2009. The issues that were unveiled in the aftermath of that election gave rise to well-grounded fears for the welfare of our constitutional rights and freedoms. And thus the Tea Party freedom movement was born. We have been dancing on a dark and foreboding razor edge ever since. This election can be part of that backlash against the lurch towards an increasingly totalitarian government at the expense of everybody's freedoms and rights. We have been frantically working ever since we burst onto the national stage to bring in good people to run for office who would represent us with the Constitution as the true authority and the guiding star. Tonight, we are proud to present 3 candidates who are campaigning to be the one to take on Mark Warner for United States Senate. In light of the dramatic impact on the normal campaign life cycle, this event tonight may be the first time that most will have seen or heard of these candidates. So it is critical for the candidates to clearly impress upon you their policy position and vision. And it's equally vital that we are discerning and deliberate in assessing these candidates as they present their case to be US Senator. Our normal opportunities to meet them and have been shut down. And it is a fact that we will not get the same opportunities to interact with them or see them in action in a crowded public setting as had always been the case in the past. Just to let you know, the questions have been coming from you, the viewers. Even as we speak, we're fielding the questions. The questions have been compiled since the last couple of weeks till now. and from our viewership, and that they have been not shared with the candidates. The candidates, all of them will be hearing them for the first time at this point. In our debut event, I spoke with pride regarding your Tea Party Executive Board, their talents, their dedication. I have been anxious to introduce the Executive Board to you as we address the issues of our day. Last time you were introduced to the highly talented Vice Chair, Brian Landrum. So tonight I am very proud to introduce to you Jim Evans, who is now our Elections Chair. And earlier this past year, he ran for Virginia State Delegate in a Democratic-controlled district. He ran a campaign that we could all be proud of in terms of its integrity, position, and work ethic. He ultimately lost the race, but we gained considerable ground in presenting lifelong Democrats with a viable option other than reflexively pulling the lever for the Democrats. He will be going over the guidelines to the debate and providing the questions submitted from our audience. Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great pride that I give you Jim Evans as our moderator for tonight's debate.
Thank you, Nelson. And let me go ahead and read this. These are the rules. They're very simple. They're just 7. The Republican candidate debate for the U.S. Senate will last approximately 1 hour. We will operate on the rule of let's respect each other. No interrupting when someone else is speaking. If you want to rebut another candidate's response to a question, you will need to raise your hand prior to the next question being asked by the moderator. You will have 30 seconds to rebut. Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Gabe, and Mr. Speciale, you have 1.5 minutes each for opening remarks to inform us about who you are and why you are running for this office. After the opening remarks, you will be asked to answer a series of questions that we received from the Virginia Tea Party online questionnaire. We hope to ask as many questions as possible this evening. You will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we're going to be using a round robin format for selection. Brian will inform you when the 30-second remaining period begins so that you'll know to bring it to a close. If you go over the 2 minutes, you will be muted. At the 10-minute mark, before we conclude the debate, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for a closing statement. And that's how easy it is. And so thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And the first question that we're going to go ask, and Ms. Baldwin, you've been chosen to be the first one. Okay. All right. So here it is. Where do each of you stand on the reopening of Virginia? Any date in mind? And do you suggest phasing it in?
Thank you, Jim, for that question. So we're going to get right into questions and skip the opening statements.
Oh, I apologize. You're right.
I'm fine either way.
No, you go ahead and make your opening statement.
Okay, I'm a rules follower, so I wanted to make sure I was doing it correctly. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Elisa Baldwin, and I am very much a political outsider. I am a civics teacher by day, and that continues even now, although this is kind of my new normal, online classroom and online reaching out to folks. And so elisabaldwin.com has a lot of the biographical information that you'll want to know, as well as where I stand on most issues in case we don't get to that concern that you might have in tonight's online forum. I grew up in Virginia. I am a native Virginian, have been here 41 years, and May will be my birth month. So my family is consistently reminding me that I'm about to be 42, and that is difficult to believe. I am pro-life. 100% unequivocal in being pro-life. Life begins at conception and ends when God calls us home. I am pro-Second Amendment. I am a civilian user of firearms and do so responsibly at indoor shooting ranges that need to reopen immediately. And I am firmly someone who defends and champions the Constitution every day. My copy looks a little worn, and that's because I use it just like I do God's word. So I welcome the questions tonight, and we'll be glad to address that first reopening Virginia question as soon as the other two candidates give their opening statements. Thanks so much, Jim. Elisa Baldwin, everybody. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Appreciate it. Now, Mr. Speciale, your introduction.
Hello, everybody. This is Tom Speciale. I'm out here with my pointer Princess, sitting on my back deck, enjoying this wonderful opportunity to talk to everybody and to get a chance to talk again with the other candidates, as well as statewide with the Virginia Tea Party. I'm a 28-year Army veteran. I'm still serving in the Army Reserves right now. For the last 10 years, I've served in the intelligence community. I like to say that to simplify things, over the last 10 years, I wrote the war plans for Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, the defense of Israel, Ukraine. So and as much as I love these other candidates on here, I'm the candidate that's been working in national defense for the last 10 years. And I'm the candidate that's the most and best equipped to take out Mark Warner, because really that's what this is about. This really isn't about us. You know, this is going to be about who can beat Mark Warner. And I think that, you know, for the last 4 years, I've been getting ready to beat Mark Warner because I decided in 2016 that I was going to do this. And Mark Warner's not going to be easy. Mark Warner's not going to be easy to beat. So ask yourself if we want another establishment candidate to run against Mark Warner. He's already beat those guys twice, but he can't beat the junkyard dog. He can't beat me.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Gade.
Hey everybody, Daniel Gade here, candidate for U.S. Senate. Last name is spelled G-A-D-E. I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. Sorry we couldn't be there in person, but I have met many of you before. And Nelson, it's nice to see you again, especially. I know you live down on the beach. Look, I served in combat in 2004 and a few days of 2005, and I lost 2 soldiers killed in action, a soldier named Dennis Miller and another soldier named Tyler Brown. Both of those men bled for our freedoms. And then a few weeks later, I was seriously wounded and I nearly died bleeding for our freedoms. And what I'm afraid of, although I was never scared in combat, which is awesome, but I was never scared in combat, but I'm a little scared now. I'm afraid that our freedoms are slipping away. Our freedoms are being taken by people who think that they belong in Richmond or Washington, D.C., instead of with the people. And that's where God made them, and that's where nature's God put them. And that's where freedom belongs, is in the people. And so I'm going to do in this race like I've always done. I'm going to fight, I'm going to serve, and I'm going to protect the Constitution of the United States, because ultimately I'm here with the same oath, but a new mission. Now, I'm equipped for this work. I worked in the Trump administration as a political appointee. I worked as a policy advisor in the Bush administration. I have a PhD in public policy. I'm ready for this work. I'm ready to take this fight on, and I'd be thrilled to be your next servant in the United States Senate. Daniel Gade, I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, as you all know, the first question, so I'm going to go ahead and repeat it again. And Mr. Speciale, you'll be the first one up on this one. Okay. All right. Here's the question again. Where do each of you stand on the reopening of Virginia? Any date in mind? And do you suggest phasing it in?
I'm sorry, do I suggest what?
Phasing it in.
Well, immediately, I'm going to be participating in some activities tomorrow, as a matter of fact, in Richmond, making that very clear, along with organizations from all over the state. At noon tomorrow, we're going to be making a very clear statement regarding the unconstitutional behavior of our governor. And I believe immediately. And I think that, you know, when we say phased in, you know, certainly at any time that you would have an infectious disease going around, you would have to apply, you know, particular processes that are going to prevent those that are vulnerable from becoming infected. But the reality is we're finding out that this COVID-19 scare was hyped to a great degree, and I believe that it was weaponized against us to terrorize the American people. I really do believe that. And now that doesn't mean it isn't contagious. That doesn't mean it isn't responsible for killing people who were already vulnerable to things like the flu and pneumonia and things like that. But what it does mean is that we have to be prudent about what we open and when. But I believe that we need to open the state immediately for those people that are healthy and not at risk, that would be normally not at risk for that we're finding out that the fatality of COVID-19 is probably less than 0.5% or something. We don't even know what the number is yet because we haven't done enough tests to find out, but we know for a fact that while it might be contagious, it is not fatal. And there was this real big scare that there were going to be 2 million people dead and every ventilator in the country was going to be overrun. And that turned out to be a complete and utter fallacy. And those people responsible need to be held accountable.
All right, thank you. Okay. Now, Mr. Gade, you are next. Would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I understand the question. So can you see me okay? Yeah, okay. All right. So, the White House has laid out a clear 3-phase approach to opening economies. And I think that makes sense. What we have to do, though, is realize here that a couple of things. One, every job is critical. Every job is critical, not just, of course, first responders, of course, truck drivers, of course, the people who are stocking grocery shelves. Those are incredibly important jobs. And those people have been heroic over the last 2 months in the face of unknown danger and then known danger later. So every job is critical. Secondly, small businesses are the engine of our economy, and we need to absolutely get our small businesses back in gear so that they can keep our economy going, because too many Americans are suffering right now. Now, the White House has laid out, as I said before, the White House has laid out a very clear 3-step process where the first step is making sure that the daily case rate is going down for 14 consecutive days. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that the White House has the best advisors on this, and we ought to follow the White House guidance on that. But the main problem, the thing that is driving Virginians crazy, including me, by the way, is that Ralph Northam has been terrible on this issue because he is not communicating with us. He's not telling us what the science is. And as a result, people are both fearful and suffering, and it's the worst possible combination. So what we need is a governor who tells us the truth. Of course, none of us are running for governor. We need a governor who tells us the truth. We need to get this economy reopened. And we're going to take a small step in that direction, actually, tomorrow night. There's something called the Great American Tailgate tomorrow night from 5 to 8. It's nonpartisan, nothing like that. We're going to be in Old Town Petersburg. I'm going to be in Old Town Petersburg tomorrow. And we're going to just take out food at those restaurants there. We're going to have a tailgate with our friends, stay 6 feet apart from people who aren't in our family, all that stuff. And we're going to start sparking this economy because it's time for the economy to reopen. Now, people who are in grave danger, people who have pre-existing conditions and all that, those people should stay home. Their loved ones should take care of them in a way that doesn't expose them to extra risk. But it's clearly time to open the economy. We need to do it smartly, as soon as possible, and in a way that protects the vulnerable.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gade. Now, Ms. Baldwin, would you like for me to repeat the question?
I'm good on the question. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
When you're used to working with about 25 students, you have to remember what was back at the original. So in terms of reopening Virginia, it really never should have been shut down with such draconian dictator style leadership that Ralph Northam offered the people of Virginia, because we are a free people and we should be trusted to make decisions for ourselves. And unfortunately, we were not given that opportunity. I remember when he closed schools and the public schools had no opportunity to dispute that at the local level, thinking this is so much another example, a blatant example of the left and their overreach. Because I live in a rural area and our community still has not been hard hit, thankfully. And that's wonderful, good news for us. And yet we were closed just like everybody else that was facing more serious consequences of the coronavirus spread. People have done their part to slow the spread. I think we need to reopen. in the phases, following common sense and good hygiene practices, because again, we're a free people. We can be trusted to think for ourselves, to exercise discretion and good judgment, and move forward in confidence, because it should never have been an either or, economy or health and safety. It never should come down to people living in fear versus having the opportunity to put food on their tables. And so the great people of Virginia are going to do what we've always done, and that's overcome obstacles. And I think that the sooner we can support businesses coming back online, and I've been visiting local farms and businesses that have stayed open to give them the support that I can, and look forward to continuing to do that as we move ahead. So any day now works as the any date timeline, and the phases that have been set forth by the White House, I think, give great flexibility to people and moving us ahead with great sensibility as well. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Gade, you're going to get this next question first. And so this is a lengthy question. So I'm going to read it slowly and precisely here. Religious freedom and freedom of conscience are under assault here in Virginia and around the country. What will you do to protect our First Amendment rights against progressive activists aggressively forcing businesses, institutions, and individuals to accept and accommodate policies that violate their faith convictions?
Well, religious freedom is obviously our First Amendment right, along with freedom of association. And so the question here is really about whether government has the right to force people to associate with people they don't prefer to associate with, and whether government has the right to stomp on strongly held religious beliefs in the pursuit of some form of equality. Now, we've seen this playing out in a number of ways. The Virginia legislature just recently passed something that on the federal level is called the Equality Act, which forces churches and places of worship and things like that, other places of worship, to accommodate people who are transgender in their preferred bathroom and things like that. So there's some real areas in which our religious freedom is under assault. And here's the thing: of course, we should be kind to people. Of course, if somebody isn't bothering you and they want to be called a different name than what's on their birth certificate, no problem at all. But where it gets into where government action becomes coercive on this, that's when I get really concerned. And listen, I'm an absolute I'm fully in on religious freedom of worship. When I was appointed by President Trump to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I went through my Senate confirmation hearing, this is one of the questions that they were stuck on. And Elizabeth Warren, actually, I think it was Elizabeth Warren, was grilling me and the other nominees on it, and she said, are you going to go with this LGBT agenda stuff? And the answer was, look, I will enforce the law. Of course I'll enforce the law. But what we're talking about right now is usurping rights in the favor to sort of pander to some special interests. And I think that's the wrong approach. And we've seen, again, you were totally right. We've seen our rights under attack. Our religious freedom is under attack. And I am a constitutional absolutist. I will stand up for our religious liberty as I'll stand up for our other constitutional rights. And I've been doing that for my entire life since I was 17.
Thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Speciale, would you like for me to reread the question?
Am I supposed to be next, or are we doing a round robin?
A round robin, yeah. You're next.
I am. Okay. Okay. That is like a whole lot to say. I'm going to make sure that our constitutional rights are protected. All right. The bottom line is, all this word salad that everybody thinks that they have to say, it's ridiculous. Okay. It's a constitutional right. Okay. Of free speech. So, and I'm sympathetic of people who want to be called by another gender identity. I'm sympathetic too. But the government is stepping in and trying to allow people to sue people for calling people by their birth gender. And that's what Daniel Gade, that's what he's getting at. Okay, but he doesn't want to say it. The bottom line is you absolutely have a right to free speech. Okay, what is lost in this is that liberals and Democrats really want to go after what they call hate speech, which is any kind of speech they don't like. And they want to criminalize people for exercising their free speech when it's speech that they don't like. And so what they're going to do is, instead of saying, hey, everybody has a right to speak their mind, what they're going to say is no, you don't get the right to speak your mind, because that's hate speech. And listen real closely, there's a move afoot to turn hate speech into a domestic terrorism crime. Now think about that for a minute, everybody. Think about being labeled a domestic terrorist and what that means about all of your other constitutional rights because somebody doesn't like what you said. Because that's the real battle we're in. So all of that really nice, fancy language that we get fed every time we run a moderate Republican, the bottom line is free speech, free assembly, and the freedom to bear arms shall not be infringed. These things can't be infringed. And I'm sick of the moderate crap all the time.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Baldwin, would you like for me to repeat the question?
I've got it, Jim. Thank you. And I love how you're saying Ms. Baldwin. You don't want to risk being wrong on the first name, Elisa. So respectful and safe. I appreciate that. So when it comes to our First Amendment rights, particularly our freedom of religion, I am a strong Christian conservative as well as a constitutional conservative, and Congress shall make no law establishing the religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I mean, those are pretty clear words, kind of like I thought Second Amendment shall not infringe was clear, and then some people seemingly misunderstood. That's not to say that people can't believe differently, because they do. And everyone is entitled to have the opportunity in America, which is wonderful, to believe or not, and not have that forced down your throat, not have someone else imposing their beliefs onto you as an agent of the government and legislating it so. And so I think that it's a shame that we have those who are serving the people as elected representatives, and instead of responding to their constituents, they are ignoring the claims of religious freedom and instead promoting their own leftist agenda, their liberal radical ideas that we would have abortions open and churches closed. I mean, the ludicrousness of that is just beyond anything I can fathom. That in America, home of the free because of the brave, we can't go to church, but you can go kill a baby. It does not make sense to me. It's beyond comprehension. And so we've got to allow business owners to step up and lead with their own conscience. And yes, be respectful. I have a phrase in my classroom: work hard and be nice to people. And certainly we can be tolerant, but the left is not. And they're the ones that always claim intolerance on the part of strong conservatives and Christians in particular. And we are the moral majority in this country, and we need to take it back.
Hey, Jim, I don't know if you can see me. This is Daniel Gade.
Okay.
Yeah, just briefly, Tom called me out by name, and I just want to respond because he called me out by name. I'm not going to respond to what he said, but I will say this. One of the things I'm most proud about with this president and with this Senate is that the president is appointing conservative judges who are standing up for things in cases like Hobby Lobby and standing up and protecting religious liberty. So we're already seeing the effects of a president who knows what he's doing and a Senate that knows what they're doing. And I'm absolutely for confirming as many of those judges as possible to change these courts for a generation to stand up for our religious liberty.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Elisa, thank you for your answer as well. And Tom, you're going to be next on this next question. I'm going to bring you up. Here's the next question. Should you be successful in winning the seat of U.S. Senator from Virginia, to which three Senate subcommittees would you like to be appointed, and why?
intelligence, education, and armed services. Obviously the intelligence committee, because of the fact that of all the candidates here, I'm the only one that's actually handled top secret classified documents and participated in all kinds of classified decisions that our government has made over the last 10 years. Armed services, because I'm still actively serving in the reserves. I just swore my 17-year-old son in about 5 months ago to be a U.S. Army Infantry Airborne Ranger. He wants to be a Green Beret. And then education, because I think that that's the bedrock of, that's really the bedrock of our success, is a re-envisioning and reimagining and a reinvestment in our education in this country. And I've used throughout my life, I've used almost every form of education you can imagine, from, brick and mortar schools to correspondence courses to online, taught myself stuff through, using YouTube videos. So I'm a big fan of human capital development. And I think we need to inspire people like Alicia does with regard to inspiring kids today to get really, really motivated about developing their human capital. And I think that's going to take a re-envisioning of our education system. So, yeah, those three. I think in addition to that, and with regard to the intelligence issue, Michael Flynn just basically got completely exonerated. And I have all of the skills, and I know exactly what documents to ask for to go after all those people that tried to do a soft coup against our president. I know exactly what the documents are I have to ask for, because I've written those documents. I've handled those documents. I've supported those kinds of operations personally. I've carried out those operations in Afghanistan. So I'm the one best suited to go and prosecute these people that tried to coup our president.
Okay. And the next one is Mr. Gabe. Dan, for your response.
Yeah, sure. So armed services, in Virginia right now, we have hundreds of thousands of active duty troops and about 1 million veterans out of the 9 million people who serve here. So this is a state that is deeply, deeply dependent on defense spending and on our military. And so I'd love to serve on Armed Services Committee. And look, I bring a kind of credibility as a retired lieutenant colonel with 25 years of active duty, or of service overall, 20 years of active duty commissioned officer time, that is sorely lacking on that committee right now. So that's part one, is armed services. Part two is VA. This is considered to be a low status committee, which is crazy to me, because the VA spends about $230 billion a year on caring for our nation's 18 million veterans who served honorably. Now, obviously, I maybe you don't know this, I lost a leg in combat, so I know a little something about VA disability. And also, by the way, I served in the White House doing veterans policy for the Bush administration and doing veterans employment policy for the Trump administration. So I'm deeply immersed in the issues affecting our nation's veterans, and I'm ready to absolutely serve them on day one. And remember, we have about 1 million veterans in Virginia, and obviously people who are dependent on them. And then the last one is, there is, of course, no education committee, but there is something called the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, the HELP Committee. And the HELP Committee is critically important, because not only does it have oversight over future iterations of government involvement in healthcare, but it also does education work. It also does, of course, as the name implies, labor work and pensions work. So when I was grilled in my Senate confirmation hearing by the HELP Committee, by the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, that is just one of the many things that committee does. It's incredibly important work. Now, it's not sexy, it's not fun necessarily, but what it is critically important to those kitchen table issues that Virginians care about.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, and Elisa, your response.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that question because it does give us a chance to make some distinctions between ourselves a little bit more for the voting public. Certainly, as an educator, I have lots to say with education reform and scaling back the U.S. Department of Education and kind of getting back our federal government into its constitutional provisions. So the committee that Dan Gage just mentioned with the health, education, labor is absolutely one that I think I bring a lot of expertise to as the next senator from Virginia. And I support the right to work initiatives and education reform and getting that back to the local level in the states, because the parents rightly have the authority to train up a child in the way that he or she should go. I also think the Government Affairs Committee would be a good fit for me and my background, because I did actually study political science and leadership studies when I was at the University of Richmond, and know public policy to the extent that a servant leader should, and to be able to ask those questions and pull together resources to refine and deregulate and help Trump in that effort. And because we're asking for votes from the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think we absolutely need a seat on the Armed Services Committee, no matter who becomes the US Senator, because we are representing all of Virginians. And while I have not served, my grandfathers both did. And I know that when someone serves, the family serves with that individual. And we need to make sure that we're looking out for the whole military community, including those veterans, those family members, because where one serves, we all serve. And so I'd like to thank Tom for mentioning that I inspire kids, but I have found on the campaign trail that I'm inspiring a lot of adults who felt like they couldn't ask questions about politics and are now being engaged at greater levels. And that's wonderful.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
And
Now,
since I was named real quick, can I just throw one thing out real quick?
sure.
I just want to say that, and I missed this last opportunity, but I always throw out that I think that Ms. Baldwin is by far one of the most courageous women I've ever met in my life for what you're doing.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, now, I hope I haven't lost my place here, but I think, Dan, you're next. Is that correct for the round robin?
I'm happy to go. We can do it.
Okay.
Whatever you can re-roll the dice if you like, Jim. I don't know where we are.
Yeah.
I'm having fun. It's all good.
I've been listening closely to all the answers, and they're very good. Now, here's the next question. What is the number one thing you do to make a difference when you beat Warner? What is the number one thing you would do to make a difference when you beat Warner?
Well, I mean, I've got a flippant answer, which is I'll actually do the work that he's been hired to do for the last 11 years, right? I mean, here we've got a guy who the Washington Post last year said that he is, quote, muddled through his time in the Senate with few signature accomplishments. So what we need is a senator who's ready and willing to do the work that the people of Virginia require. Now, I've said, and I stand by this, that my first bill that I'm going to put in is something that I call the SIT Act, which is Stop Insider Trading. And what that is, it builds on something that was passed a few years ago called the Stock Act. But what the SIT Act does is requires every senator or congressman, the day they're sworn in, to put all of their holdings in a blind trust so that it's managed by somebody else. Because we saw at the run up to this COVID crisis, we saw that some of these people were trading on their insider knowledge, and it wasn't just Democrats, by the way, it's also Republicans. So we need a true servant leader back in this work. We need somebody who's willing to work hard for the people of Virginia. And we need somebody who knows what they're doing and can do the work on day one, and I'm ready to do it. Now, Mark Warner's been in there a long time, and when he was a governor, he tried to pretend he was moderate. I was talking to a guy today who said, oh yeah, I voted for him, I gave money to him when he was governor. And now he says he's a radical centrist, but what he does is he votes with Schumer 85% of the time. He votes with Elizabeth Warren 84% of the time. So he's dropped off the centrist part and just become a radical. And what Virginia doesn't need is somebody who is not representing their values, but is instead representing New York and California values. And that's Mark Warner.
Thank you. All right, now, Elisa, you're next.
Great, I appreciate the question, because I've said repeatedly that Virginians deserve better than Mark Warner. He legislates as terribly as he makes tuna melt sandwiches. And I think we've all seen that video and the train wreck that it is. So it would be my privilege as the next US Senator from Virginia to do something quite different than Mark Warner, and that's to listen to the voices of the voters and put in the time to hear from the constituents. A recent example is he came for a town hall before the COVID shutdown, and was very selective with his guest list, first and foremost. So it wasn't an open town hall. And then had said he was there to listen and take questions from constituents that were concerned, as well he should. And yet he talked for 55 of the 60 minutes. And when the questions got a little too heated about his votes on against the Balanced Budget Amendment, against the Born Alive Act, he left and said that he needed to make way to the Tidewater area for his next appointment. And that's not something that I would ever do, is run away from the Virginia people, because they are who I seek to represent. I am certainly someone who, I'm not part of the DC establishment. I have worked really hard to connect with voters across Virginia, because I believe that we, the people, can have better. And that starts with coming together as a team to elect a godly servant leader and put in the work. But in terms of legislation, the top two priorities for me would be the Born Alive Act and repealing the Gun Free Zones Act, because it is dreadful that as a classroom teacher, I'm put in the position knowing how to responsibly protect myself and defend students, that I'm armed with a can of green beans and instead of my Glock. And we should not be sitting ducks. We should absolutely be able to exercise our right to defend ourselves. So thanks.
And thank you. Now, Tom, you're next.
Yeah, I think it's very clear how poorly we've been represented in Washington by Mark Warner. One of the things that I noticed when they voted to impeach our president was right before Mark Warner cast his vote basically to impeach, he sat there and bootlicked Dianne Feinstein from California for a full 3 or 4 minutes, congratulating her on her leadership in the Senate, all for California money. I mean, that's the whole purpose of that. He works for the DNC, and I believe he's a like a mole in Virginia. He sits right there in the middle, and he votes on national defense things with just enough effort so that he can say that he's kind of a national security guy. But as was highlighted, in every other way, he votes against our values. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Virginia values back to Washington, D.C. That's a fact. Okay. Not California values, not New York values, not Florida donor money. That's all got to go by the wayside. We have got to run these Democrats out of there. And that includes Tim Kaine as well. We've got to get them out of there. The very first thing I'm going to do when I get there is I'm going to go after implementing national reciprocity for concealed carry and constitutional carry across the United States. But that's not going to be, that's just the beginning. We've got to go after defending the entire Constitution. We've got to go after all this ludicrous policy about, domestic terrorism regarding hate crime, the conversation about changing the Electoral College. We've got to go after and attack the narrative, the false narratives that the Democrats use. And ultimately, Mark Warner is their servant. He's just hiding here in Virginia. So that he can cast that vote for California, New York, and Florida. And we've got to run him out, period. Bart, nothing else. We've got to run him out.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Okay. And Dan, your response.
I already gave my response, but I'm happy to have 2 extra minutes. I'll just keep going. We can't hear you, Jim.
I'm sorry. I apologize. We're going to start with Lisa this time, and I do apologize to you. Okay.
Oh, I'm happy to go again. Like I said,
Okay.
bonus time.
Now, this question, the person had a concern. It says, do you support the prevention of Sharia law from invading our legal system in this country? How would you handle this?
So I'm unmuted. Okay, good. I appreciate the question because certainly we do see that pressure for Sharia law to take effect here in the great United States of America. And we have to remember that we are a constitutional republic, and that we have Judeo-Christian principles as our founding fathers set forth for us when they created the greatest document of all time, our Constitution. And so we need to absolutely champion our conservative values and our constitutional principles by educating and engaging with others to make sure that they understand that we cannot have those types of crimes and Sharia law attacking American values here in the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tom, you're next.
Well, I got to tell you, Jim, and everybody out there, as a counterterrorism analyst for the last 10 years, and really I've been studying Islam and the consequences of militant Islam going back to really the early 80s. Even the concept of Sharia law coming here and people advocating for it is just absolutely ludicrous, because I thought Islam was just a religion, right? I mean, that's what we're told. We're told we can't fight a religion because, well, it's a religion and it's against our Constitution to fight a religion. But anybody who really understands Islam, they know that Islam is both a political system and a religion. It's both. And this is one of my biggest arguments I have with people who talk about terrorism that really don't know what the heck they're talking about. Sharia law is, you know, a really primitive form of justice built on an honor system in Middle Eastern culture, where the family's honor can be besmirched, and then therefore, because of that, you can just basically take out any kind of a vendetta against anybody that you want, as long as you're either not caught or that the local elders basically support your charge. So it isn't coming here, and I think that that while we hear about it in the press a lot, and people advocate for it, it's antithetical in every imaginable way from our way of life. And so when people try and implement, or I mean, they just need to be labeled criminals, because the implementation of Sharia law is criminal in the United States, in the most extreme versions of it. You know, mediation and things like that, probably nobody would care, because it'd be you know, spousal decisions about divorce and things like that. But they're still going to have to follow U.S. code. They're still going to have to follow U.S. law when it comes right down to it, and go through the process. But people don't even know what they're talking about most of the time when they're talking about Sharia law. But as the three candidates up here, I've been studying it since the 80s, and it ain't coming here.
All right, and thank you. And Dan, your response?
Well, thanks, Jim. So, you know, I served in combat in Iraq for about 5.5 months until I was seriously injured and evacuated. My that part of my war was over, and I saw how the people are suffering, and that wasn't even real Sharia law, in the sense that it was still kind of the Wild West, and the Sharia law still hadn't been fully established, as it would be a few years later, when the hardcore people went back into Syria, regrouped, and then came out as ISIS. So that's what happened there. And if you like Sharia law, you would have liked to be under ISIS rule, because that's what that was. That was the most extreme version of that. But the question is a little bit misleading, in the sense that it fails to respect the fact that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. There is no other. There's no religious law. There's no, you know, the Bible is not the supreme law of the United States. The Constitution of the United States is. And for that reason, Sharia law is not going to be a threat in that way. But I also just want to push back a little bit on some of the tone of what I've heard here tonight, because remember, the religious people who happen to be Muslims, who are living in Virginia now peacefully, going to church, these are deeply religious people. They're pro-life, they're pro-marriage, they're pro-small government. They would just want to be left alone. And so what we need to do is we need to be doing as much outreach into those communities as possible, to those who are willing to live under the supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States. So, you know, I'm a little worried about the tone there. I don't like that very much. But these are our friends and neighbors who we're talking about in the main, although there are some who are going for the extreme versions of Sharia law.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, now on this for the next question, Tom, you'll be up for the next question. Okay, and it is, what qualities do you think are necessary in vetting a Supreme Court nominee?
Well, that they're a constitutionalist, and they're principled, and they're not a progressive. They're not an activist. They don't have a history of being an activist in regard to our legal system. Yeah, it's pretty simple. I think that while we're talking about the Bible isn't the law of the land. Clearly, it's not the law of the land, but our biblical values are the foundation of our Constitution. And so, for me, that those values, those core values, have to be demonstrated in everything that they've ever done as a judge before they're going to go to the Supreme Court. And I think that our president has done just an amazing job of doing that. So, I mean, this isn't a tough question. I think you need to have, constitutional judges that are going to follow the Constitution and aren't going to try and reinterpret it, reinvent it, or recreate it, in their own vision or in the vision of some, outside progressive, doctrine. I mean, it's to me, that's a simple question of, we just need judges that are going to follow the Constitution the way it was written, originalists, rather than those that are going to try and rewrite it.
All right, thank you. Okay, now, Dan, you're next. What is your response?
Well, the Constitution is a contract. It's not a living document. There's no such thing as a living Constitution. The Constitution is a contract between past generations and current generations and future generations. And so if you go back to the Federalist Papers, you read exactly what the purpose of the judiciary was. And the purpose of the judiciary was to basically mediate disagreements and to call balls and strikes where laws were passed that were outside the constitutional bounds and strike down the ones that were outside the constitutional bounds. So what we need is simple. It's a one question test. It's, do you believe that the Constitution is a contract as it's written? And if they do, great. If they don't, then they're unacceptable. Because remember, the purpose of having a big, huge, the House of Representatives is horrible. It's 435 members and it's a big mess and it takes forever to get anything through. And the Senate's too, everybody thinks the Senate is unwieldy and everything. The purpose of having those people is that they're accountable to their constituents, right? The reason the judiciary is so dangerous if they begin interpreting the law on their own is because they're accountable to nobody, because it's a lifetime appointment. So this is the most important thing that a senator does. It's the single most important thing that a senator does, maybe with the possible exception of the decision to vote to go to war. But I still think judges are the most important thing. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, Elisa, what is your response?
Yes, I think we're going to find some common ground here among our Republican will certainly be showing in that, besides having good moral character, when we're vetting someone for the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, they absolutely need to be someone who agrees with us, with me in particular, that it needs to be reread, not rewritten, and to interpret the Constitution as it was written, not as, the wind may blow with changing times. And so they also are, of course, responsible for looking at the constitutionality of executive orders. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, Congress continues to abdicate its responsibility. And so the president has had to take action to protect and preserve our constitutional republic and our freedoms in a lot of ways. And technically, those are also government overreach. And so we need those jurists on the Supreme Court bench to be able to call out the president as well, to scale back all federal government power, because we do champion limited government. And that is, that the sun rises and sets with the Constitution here. But that, for me, good moral character piece is also important. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the confirmation hearings of late is far left radical attacks and manufactured situations on good people, and it does far more harm than good. So we absolutely need to support conservative justices being appointed to the bench, and the depth and breadth of that experience without the political activism, because they should not be legislating from the Supreme Court. And fun fact, John Marshall actually expanded the power of the Supreme Court and was one of the few to serve in all three branches of government, a native Virginian like myself.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we've reached the 10-minute mark already. It's been very quick. And so now we're going to go to the closing 2 minutes. All right. And on this, Dan, you get to begin.
Great. Well, in 2005, when I was wounded for the second time in combat, I was evacuated by a Marine. I was an Army guy, and I was evacuated by a Marine Corps helicopter to a Navy surgical facility. And I had run them out of all the A positive blood in my body, and they gave me all the A positive blood they had stored, and it wasn't enough. And they went to the mess hall and they asked for donations, and 25 sailors and Marines who I didn't know, I would never meet, came and they donated their blood, and it saved my life. And what's awesome about that story is not one person said, well, you know, is he a Republican? Is he a Democrat? Is he is he black? Is he white? Is he gay? Is he straight? Nobody cares about any of that, because at that point we had a problem to solve. And the way that we could solve that problem is by coming together. And the thing I'm most excited about in this race already is that I'm building a coalition of people around the Commonwealth who are coming together to solve this hard problem of getting rid of Mark Warner. Because it's not going to take, one person can't do it. You could be the meanest junkyard dog in the whole pack, but guess what? One person can't do it. It's going to take a big, huge coalition to do it. And I'm building the coalition that's going to make this happen. I'm going to fight for our conservative values. I'm going to take this to Washington, and I'm going to serve you like I've served you since I was 17 years old.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Okay. And Elisa, you're next.
Well, thank you, Jim, for moderating, and thank you to the Virginia Tea Party for having us this evening. It's hard to believe it's almost been an hour already. Time flies when you're having fun. And I hope that this has been informative for the voters that are tuning in through the digital means as well, because we have the opportunity to do something remarkable here. And they say it can't be done, but they don't know us. And they don't know us like that, to understand that God doesn't put a giant in front of us unless there's a David inside of us. And so I've got a servant's heart, but I also have the willingness to stand up to bullies. I always have since 4th grade. You can ask a friend of mine now, but at the time he was a bully, and I put him in his place with the mean right hook, because I'm not going to stand for the injustice. And that's what actually got me into the race. You know, I'm speaking to 8th grade middle school minds and doing my job as an educator, not a liberal indoctrinator. And they asked the question, well, if you're old enough, which we find hard to believe, how come you've never run for office before, Ms. Baldwin? And I had to take stock. And honestly, the answer was, oh, I'm not into the politics from the front. I've always supported conservative candidates in the background and helping them get elected. And they said, well, if not you, and you know the Constitution inside and out and can explain it to any voter, then who? And they called me out. And ever since, I've been living my own teaching on the campaign trail. And it's been just a remarkable journey. And I do humbly ask for your vote in the June 23rd primary election, where we have the opportunity to make history, to do something different, to dare to make the Constitution of then great again today, by choosing someone who is as far, far different from Mark Warner as we can possibly get on the ballot in November's general election, because we, the people, deserve better. And with Elisa Baldwin, you're going to get it. Thank you.
Elisa, thank you. Okay. And Tom?
I want to thank you guys again for doing this. It's so important right now with everybody on this unconstitutional stay-at-home order that you guys are facilitating this. So we really appreciate it. I think that Virginians need to be on the lookout for the Norman Rockwell life stories, that, you know, Virginians should be concerned. It's too traditional. It's too establishment. You know, there's really only 2 tribes in Virginia right now. There's a There's a Trump tribe, and then there's an establishment tribe. And, you know, our way of life is under attack. And Virginians don't want another go along to get along Republican that's going to vote against their interests to stay popular in the Senate. We need to win. That's fact. We need to win. And, you know, we've tried these moderate Republicans in the past, and Mark Warner's beaten them twice already. So he can do it again without breaking a sweat. You know, I've said this recently. You know, I believe that the reason Virginia has 2 Democrat senators is because too many conservatives can't see a difference between who we're running, that the GOP's running for this Republican nomination, and the Democrat. They can't see any difference. And, you know, the establishment keeps running these purebred rhinos. We can't do that because we're going to lose. And what I believe Virginians need, what I believe that they need, and what I believe that they want after talking to Virginians all across this state is that they want a junkyard dog. They want somebody that's going to take the fight to the Democrats. And they want somebody who is, you know, a bare knuckles fighter to beat Mark Warner. And that's me. And I'm ready. I've already worked in the intelligence community for 10 years. I can go after prosecuting these people that did what they did against our president. And I'm the only real two-way candidate in this race.
Well, Tom, thank you. Lisa, thank you. Dan, thank you. And thank you for bearing with me as we went through this. I really appreciate your answers. And the people who sent these questions in really appreciate how candid you were in answering them. Now, I'm going to introduce you to Nelson Velez, that he's going to go ahead and close this out. But again, thank you. Thank you for running. Thank you for being there and getting us back on track.
Jim, thanks for hosting tonight. You did a great job.
Yes, thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Yes, Jim, you did a great job. It was entertaining and it was engaging and it was engrossing. Our candidates were spot on. A heartfelt thank you to our great candidates. I think we have 3 warriors that we can be proud of and that we can trust will take the fight, whoever wins in June, to take the fight full throttle to Mark Warner and his endless supply of money and his treasure chest. I think that this presentation it's been critical because of the unusual historic events that we find ourselves in Virginia. I think that under any normal circumstances since the beginning of our republic, there would have been great gatherings by now, multiple great gatherings, and people would have met you up close and personal. This is so strange, and no matter what happens, I will resist that this will be the new normal. This is good because otherwise we don't have any contact with you. But I'm old-fashioned. I love the idea of being able to see you and be near you and be around people that will question in a crowd and see how you handle things, you know, on the spur of the moment. Elections do have consequences. And the last election, we saw those consequences play out in horrific fashion. These people who took over the General Assembly had a blueprint and they followed it. Some of the things that they enacted restricted our freedoms and will do great damage, not only to us, but to future generations. And those that they didn't enact, but tried to, is something that should concern us all. And if we, the people, want to reassert ourselves and demand good governance, then we all need to be involved once again. We need to see the consequences, not as a final exclamation point to our freedoms, but as a spur, as a motivator. And so I would wish that 2020 and 2021 elections be the year of the backlash, where we, the people, finally reassert ourselves once again to demand good and proper governance. So I'd like to thank all the candidates for a rousing, lively debate. And I want to God bless all of you, and God bless this country. And may God's grace be upon our good health and our continued good health as individuals and as a nation. Good night to all. But stay tuned for more good stuff in the weeks to come. And now for a word from our fabulous and talented Vice Chair, Brian Landrum. Brian,
Thank you,
take it away.
Nelson. Thank you, Nelson. It's great to conclude our second digital event as we get through this shutdown. We're looking for ways to reach out and engage with our community of activists every chance we get, and the internet has made it possible to do a lot more than we could have in years past. So I'd like to thank the Chinese for one thing, and that was inventing Zoom, although we have plenty of things to pick a bone with them about right now. Dan, Tom, Melissa, thank you. Thank you for coming on and participating in this debate. It was great to have you all. These are three candidates who are all seeking to take the fight to Mark Warner this year. The primary is on June 23rd. If you want to get out there and you want to go help one of these candidates, reach out to them, reach out to their campaigns. I'm sure they'd love to have you volunteer, whichever candidate you think is best equipped to take the fight to Warner. I encourage you to take some of your time that you're spending and use it either on direct campaigning as conditions allow, or take the fight online as well to advocate for these candidates in the way that you see fit. Donate to these candidates. And of course, you know, putting together these events is not a free endeavor. If you have, you know, any money to spare after you finish donating to one of these fine candidates, then I would welcome, and the Virginia Tea Party would welcome, your generosity to help us continue to put these events on. And just a final note, it was great to see my alma mater, the University of Richmond, well represented among these candidates. Elisa having gone there, and Dan's campaign manager attending the University of Richmond School of Law with me. Great school. Got to put in a shameless plug for it, and it'll be great when basketball season starts up again. But with that, I conclude, and I wish you all three of you, the best of luck. And to those watching, thank you for signing on, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. You did great. You did a wonderful job.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone. It was a great night. You should be proud of yourselves.
Thanks, Nelson. And thanks, Brian, for keeping us on track with time. Appreciate that.
Certainly welcome.
Good night.